Dan Gilbert and Mayor Duggan, as well as everyone's excited to see Governor Whitmer's keynote address this afternoon. All of that content is available on our website, DetroitChamber.com, as well as Detroit PBS. So please be sure to tune in. We want to make sure that this conference is accessible to all Michiganders, not just those who are here at Grand Hotel. So we're going to start off this morning, as we have the last 2 mornings, with our favorite pollster in Michigan, Richard Czuba. And our host this morning is Kevin Dietz from All Talk on WJR. So Kevin, Richard, I look forward to this.
All right. Yeah. So
Good morning.
Good morning. How are you? I just love. I love this whole conference. I love this year especially because there's so many open seats, so many elections coming up that everybody has to be here and everybody's accessible, and then everyone else is around because they want to be around those that are not often accessible, and so we have this great turnout and a lot of excitement. And we just had a chance to talk to the governor a few minutes ago. And one of the things I thought was really interesting about her polling was this polling after she went and saw Donald Trump. And supposedly the Democratic Party was furious with her, and how could you go and talk to him and give him any credibility at all? And she's like, well, I'm trying to do my job, get something done for Selfridge, trying to get something done for to stop the Asian carp, and the public seems to love it. They seem to love the idea of somebody doing their job instead of just absolutely being total enemies with the other party.
One of the interesting things we see of the governor's approval rating is it's consistently high. In this one, it was over 50, which is where she's been since, I'd say, fall of 21, at the end of COVID, that COVID era. Her numbers just took off. And it's because she speaks the language of independence. And in Michigan, that's what matters. We asked this question last year for the chamber. Do you want your political leaders to talk to the other side and go across the aisle and work with the other side to get things done? Or do you want your political leaders to fight for your party's positions? And it's not even close. 70-19, they want them to cross the aisle and get things done. So anybody who complains about the governor working with the president, they're part of that 19%.
I used to think that maybe it was because she was a cool governor. She's on TikTok. She has leather jackets and things. And probably that can be part of it. But sure. I think truly they like that she's term limited out, but she's still working really hard and trying to get things done in a situation where it'd be really easy to just say, you know what, there's a Republican president now, I'm just going to wind it down. But she's not doing that.
Michigan voters want a governor who's going to get things done, and they don't care who she has to get things done with. We see a lot of conversation nationally about how do the Democrats come back and win. In a state like Michigan, you've got to win that center. You've got to win the independents. A suggestion to national Democrats is maybe you listen to what the people who win the center in Michigan have to say. And in Michigan, we have two real superstars of the center. That is Gretchen Whitmer and Alyssa Slotkin. Mm-hmm. They're both very good at talking to independents. National Democrats should listen to what they're doing.
Yeah, but there is the problem that the media is going to pick up whatever is on the farthest to the right and the farthest to the left. So to get heard at all, it seems like you have to come out and say things that really kind of turn independents off.
It sure does, but the proof is on election day. Who actually gets elected? And it's those candidates who talk to the middle. They know the language of the middle. And if you don't know that language, it doesn't matter what party you come from, if you don't know the language of the middle, if you don't work that 20% of the vote that makes the Michigan decision, you're going to lose.
Do you have two different strategies then? One for the primary to get through and then one for the general? Or would you be better served to stick to what would work in the general?
Well, this is something we see every election, and particularly we now see it during the Trump administration, where Republicans have to carry the positions of Donald Trump. They want Donald Trump's backing to get through a primary. That becomes an albatross for independents.
Right.
Bill Schuette, when he ran in 2018, was the first candidate who really faced that albatross. I don't know that any candidate has done a good job of making that juxtaposition. Democrats aren't as saddled with that because they've been running for these midterms where Donald Trump is the question before the voters. They aren't saddled with that. They have a Democratic president, like they did with Biden. They'll have to face that.
That is one of the reasons I'm so interested in this governor's race that's coming up, because now we have an independent, Mike Duggan, who's the Democratic mayor of Detroit, running as an independent and talking about how everybody is sick of the right and the left fighting with each other, which I think is a really, really good message. How is it playing out? What are the numbers showing us?
Well, we have fresh data here, and I want to caution, we're 17 months away.
We love numbers every day, every day. We don't care if they change. We'll talk about how they changed each day.
So we tested all the different combinations. So when I refer to these numbers, I want to look at the front runners in the nominations. And we tested James, Benson, and Duggan. And there's a difference between registered voters and definite voters. Amongst registered voters, we have Benson and Duggan tied at 34. Or Benson and James tied at 34, Duggan at 22. Amongst registered voters, there's a Democratic advantage. We see Benson jump by 5 points, and Duggan is still at 22. But I just want to point out how unusual that 22 is for Mike Duggan for an independent. This is not
right.
This is not something Michigan has seen. And his numbers are probably the most interesting I've seen in 40 years.
An independent typically might have 3% or something, 5%?
Well, we typically don't even have an independent.
Right.
Because it is so rare that an independent, it is so unusual to have a candidate run as an independent, frankly, with the gravitas of Mayor Duggan. And if you look at the Metro Detroit region, for example, he is beloved in that region. He has 86% name ID, breaking 55 favorable to 8 unfavorable. That's like Gretchen Whitmer.
Right.
So that's how unusual he is. His challenge is in outstate, where nobody knows him.
Nobody.
And we've tested these questions in the past about, is Detroit on the right or wrong track? Everybody in Metro Detroit thinks Detroit's on the right track. But outstate, nobody knows. And I think it's a tale of two states here. There's always been this divide between the Metro Detroit and the rest of the state, but I think this candidacy highlights that difference. The challenge for Mayor Duggan moving forward is, it's both a challenge and an opportunity. Can he translate some of his power in Metro Detroit into relationships with voters in outstate? If he can, this becomes a very serious three-way race.
So it seems like this story of Detroit's comeback, it seems like it's this national story. We had the NFL draft and the whole world was watching. We got all this good press. Is the rest of the state not aware of this, or do they not associate Duggan with that? Or
no, they're not aware of it. We've asked this question a million times, and outstate voters just don't know what's happening in Detroit, which I know for those of us in Metro Detroit is shocking. But they're not in the media market. They don't see the stories every day. And we see this national narrative of the Detroit comeback, but even that is not registering yet. It is going to take daily, constant hammering of the story for it to sink into the psyche of the nation that Detroit has come back.
So the other side of this, the other part of the equation is the finances. And I think about Jocelyn Benson may not have to spend a ton of money to get through the primary. Mike Duggan doesn't have to spend any. He'll be there. He's an independent. For the Republicans, I don't know. Is Mike Cox registering against John James? Are they going to be able to beat each other up a little, spend their money, and then be weak when they get to the general?
Well, the candidate with the highest name ID for governor isn't actually in the race yet. And that is Tudor Dixon.
Okay.
She has 75% name ID. It's underwater. It's unfavorable because there's a lot of Democrats who remember that name and don't like it. But Republicans do like her.
Right.
And, if she were to get into this race, she would give John James some real fits in the primary. This is not a slam dunk for Congressman James running. I think he is going to face a number of candidates. They're going to have some money. He's going to have to fight to win that nomination. I think the path for Secretary Benson is frankly looks easier because Democrats know her and like her. So there's a real difference there, but it's also that opportunity for that third candidate too.
The last time I interviewed Tudor Dixon, she said she was seriously looking at the Senate race and the governor's race, and I don't think she's decided yet on either one. How does the Senate race look for her and for everybody?
Well, the Senate race looks like a much more traditional Michigan race. I mean, the governor's race we're all excited about because we don't see three-way races in Michigan. There's going to be a two-way race. Mike Rogers is the clear favorite on the Republican side. He comes in with 76% name ID, a lot of residual name ID from the last election. On the Democratic side, you have three candidates, Congresswoman Haley Stevens and Abdul El-Sayed, both come in at about 43% name ID. Mallory McMorrow comes in at about 21% name ID. She has a lot further to go. But Rogers has a clear 30-point name ID advantage, and yet, when you look at the head-to-heads in the general election, Rogers leads amongst registered voters against Abdul El-Sayed and Mallory McMorrow. But Haley Stevens leads by 1 point amongst registered voters, and that expands to 6 points amongst definite voters.
Is this statewide, or are some stronger in Grand Rapids, is some stronger in Detroit, some stronger maybe up?
Well, clearly, Haley Stevens, as I like to say, she has some independent zhuzh, that Alyssa Slotkin has. Not as strong as Slotkin's, but she has something extra, particularly down in Southeast Michigan. She brings something that, frankly, the other two Democrats don't have yet. And when we look specifically at those independents, Rogers and Stevens are tied amongst independents. Even though Rogers has that 30-point name ID advantage, when you look at Abdul El-Sayed, Rogers leads independents by 22 points. When you look at Mallory McMorrow, he leads them by 17. Haley Stevens has something with those independents that's unusual.
So how far will this go in the primary? Will people drop out, or will they stay in, likely based on the numbers that you're seeing? Is there any reason for someone to bail and say, I don't want to run a race I can't win?
Well, there's a lot of reasons to bail, but do we know any politicians that ever really do?
Right.
I mean, at the time we did the poll, for example, former Speaker Joe Tate wasn't in the race yet, so his numbers aren't in here. But the one thing I will say is, and this is just historically, state representatives and state senators don't particularly poll very high in name ID with the voters. They really overestimate their name ID and, frankly, their importance with the voters versus a congressperson, somebody who's held a bigger office. So they're at a disadvantage in these races.
So of all the numbers that you've been looking at, what is like the biggest surprise number that, what kind of caught you?
Well, I think the number that caught me goes back to the economy. And that is, we're seeing drastically increased concerns about the recession and inflation. And why that's important is, this is going to be a referendum on Donald Trump. Any midterm is a referendum on the presidency, with the exception of 22, which was a referendum on Roe v. Wade.
Right, right.
So this will be about Donald Trump, and how those independents think of the economy is going to determine where this election goes.
If Tudor Dixon were to jump back in, would she have that issue? Would she still be stuck with that issue, though, even though the issue on abortion has been settled in the state?
Yes.
Will those commercials come back and be a problem for her?
Well, one of the things we see is that the abortion issue, its impact has waned with independents, but it is very powerful on the Democratic side. So it's a very strong galvanizing tool on the Democratic side. Those independents, it's about the economy. We saw that in the presidential. They weren't happy with the economy, and guess what? They're still not happy with the economy, and they think it's getting worse. If that continues, that presents a real problem for the Republicans.
All right, I think we're out of time.
Great. Thank you, Kevin. Thank you, Richard. This has been a great session. Richard always brings energy to the stage, and the only people who bring more energy are DTE Energy, who is a sponsor of this program live from Mackinac.